Okay, so get this. We're diving deep into something pretty wild today. Donald Trump's tax plan.
Oh, yeah, this should be good.
And, well, it's a doozy.
All right, I'm all ears.
He's actually talking about completely getting rid of income tax.
Whoa, wait, you mean like
Yeah, here in the U.S.
no income tax at all?
No more income tax. You
Wow.
heard that right.
Wow, that's a bold idea.
We've got these excerpts from a Spanish language video breaking it all down. And
Okay.
let me tell you, it gets pretty wild. We're talking historical parallels and potential benefits and global impact, like the whole shebang.
Well, sign me up. I'm ready to dive in.
So to kick things off, the video highlights how Trump's looking back at a really specific period in American history.
For inspiration.
Yeah, for inspiration. And it's the Gilded Age.
Ah, the Gilded Age. Interesting.
Yeah, roughly between like 1870 and 1913.
Right.
And back then, there was no income tax.
So they just...
The government relied mostly on tariffs to fund itself.
Wow, so like a total blast from the past, kind of, except, it's Trump who's pushing this idea now.
Exactly.
Okay, so but what's the deal with this Gilded Age thing? Why is he so focused on that?
Oh, during the Gilded Age, the U.S. saw some incredible economic growth.
Really?
Like booming industry innovation, the whole 9 yards.
So Trump's basically saying, like, hey, look, this system without income tax, it can totally work.
Yeah, pretty much. And on the surface, it sounds pretty good, right?
Yeah, no income tax, booming economy. I mean, who wouldn't be at least a little bit intrigued?
Right, but I'm guessing it can't be that simple.
Yeah, you're probably right. What's the catch?
Well, the Gilded Age also had a much darker side.
Oh, I bet. Tell me more.
We're talking like extreme social inequality.
Okay.
You've got these robber barons amassing these huge fortunes.
Oh, right.
And meanwhile, tons of workers are facing just awful conditions and poverty.
So it's like a cautionary tale then?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes you think about, are we just going to repeat history's mistakes?
Prioritize economic growth, but without thinking about social equity.
Exactly. Okay, so maybe not the perfect model to be following.
Right.
But what about the specifics of Trump's actual plan? What's he proposing?
So it seems to build upon those tax cuts he did back in 2017.
You mean that?
The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
Right.
And that one benefited, I think it was something like 75% of U.S. households.
Yeah, a pretty big chunk.
A big chunk. But this new plan is taking things way further.
Oh, okay. How so?
We're talking about completely eliminating taxes on things like tips.
Oh, wow.
Which would impact like millions of people who work in the service industry.
Yeah, huge.
And no taxes on Social Security benefits for retirees.
Okay, so that's
massive for a lot of folks.
Yeah, that is a lot to take in.
It is.
It really sounds like he's going for that broad appeal, right?
Yeah.
Trying to get a lot of different voters on his side.
Yeah, you can definitely see that strategy there.
But hold on a sec. If we just get rid of income tax, how does he plan to pay for anything?
Right. Governments need money to function somehow.
Exactly where does the money come from?
That is the million-dollar question, and that's where tariffs come in.
Oh, okay.
Big time Trump's plan hinges on this whole system of jacking up tariffs.
So essentially taxes on stuff we buy from other countries.
You got it.
Okay, so let me see if I've got this straight. If I'm buying something made overseas, the price goes up because of the tariff.
Yep.
And that extra money goes to the government instead of it coming from my income tax.
Bingo.
All right, so the video suggests this could bring in trillions in revenue.
Over the next decade.
But is that really feasible?
Yeah, that's a good question because economists are pretty skeptical about eliminating income tax altogether.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge source of revenue for the feds.
Right.
And they just don't see how tariffs alone can make up for that loss.
So is this whole no income tax thing just a pipe dream then?
Maybe not. I mean, there are other options they could look into, like drastically lowering income tax rates
Instead of
getting rid of them entirely. It's a thought, at least.
So potentially stimulate economic growth and then maybe rake in more revenue in the long run.
Right. The idea is that lower taxes could lead to more investment and economic activity.
Okay. I mean, it's a complex issue. No easy answers there.
Absolutely no easy answers.
And what about the global impact of all this? We don't exactly live in a vacuum, right?
Definitely not.
So surely something this big in the U.S. would have ripple effects elsewhere.
Oh, absolutely. The source material goes into this a bit. It suggests that if the U.S. slashes its corporate tax rate, it could put pressure on other countries to stay competitive.
Exactly.
So it's like this global game of tax limbo. Everyone's trying to go lower and lower.
Kind of, yeah.
But wouldn't that be good for businesses, though?
Yeah. I mean, on the one hand, less tax means more money to invest and grow, right?
Right.
But on the other hand, if governments don't have enough revenue,
No.
they can't fund essential services.
Things like
Education, healthcare infrastructure,
yeah.
all that important stuff. Yeah, that's a good point. It's like this delicate balancing act.
It is a delicate balancing act.
Trying to find that sweet spot where you're not, hurting businesses, but you're also not leaving people high and dry.
Right.
Man, this is getting pretty murky.
It is.
It's not just about crunching numbers.
It's not.
It's about the broader societal impact, right?
Exactly.
And it's interesting, that Trump's looking at the Gilded Age for inspiration.
Yeah.
Because we talked about the economic growth.
Yeah.
But that era also led to some pretty serious social problems.
Yeah, monopolies, labor exploitation, you name it.
So the video kind of reminds us that history can teach us valuable lessons.
It can.
But we shouldn't romanticize the past either.
Right. We got to learn from both the successes and the failures.
Exactly. And it's almost like we're seeing some echoes of the Gilded Age today.
How so?
Well, you've got these rapid technological advancements in these booming economies.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's rising inequality and all this uncertainty about, the future of work.
Huh. Yeah. That's a fascinating parallel. It does make you think.
It really does. So where do we go from here? What's the takeaway for our listeners who are trying to, wrap their heads around all of this?
Well, I think the key takeaway is to stay informed, stay engaged, and think critically.
Yeah.
Because there are no easy answers when it comes to tax policy.
Right.
It's complex.
It is.
It has all these far-reaching consequences.
Yeah.
So listen to different perspectives, weigh the arguments, and form your own conclusions.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Right.
We need to move beyond just the sound bites and slogans.
Absolutely.
And really grapple with these issues.
Yeah. It's about shaping the future we want for ourselves and for future generations.
It's funny because this whole discussion about tariffs,
yeah,
the video mentions how that approach could actually end up hurting certain groups more than others.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
Let's unpack that after a quick break. Stay with us. Things are about to get even more interesting.
So we were talking about how these tariffs could end up hitting some folks harder than others.
Yeah.
It all comes down to who's really paying the price for those tariffs.
All right.
Like when you put a tariff on imported goods, the price goes up.
Yeah, so if I'm buying something from overseas, I am the one paying more.
Exactly. But it's not just about those specific imports.
Oh, yeah.
Those higher costs, they can have this ripple effect throughout the whole economy.
So prices go up for everything.
Kind of, yeah. It can get pretty messy.
Can you give me an example, something concrete so I can really understand how this works?
Sure. So imagine a clothing company that uses fabric imported from another country.
Okay.
Those tariffs make the fabric more expensive, right?
Right.
So now the company has a choice.
They either eat the cost and make less profit, or
they raise the prices on their clothes.
So they pass that cost along to me, the consumer.
Exactly.
So even if I'm buying clothes made in America,
yeah,
I could still end up paying more because of tariffs.
If those clothes use imported materials, yeah.
Wow, so that's where it gets kind of tricky.
Yeah, especially for people who are already struggling to make ends meet.
I can see that.
Economists use this term regressive to describe that kind of situation.
Regressive, what does that mean?
It means that the burden of the tax falls more heavily on lower-income households.
Oh, okay. So, if you're living paycheck to paycheck and the prices of everything go up.
Clothes, food, just basic stuff.
It takes a bigger chunk out of your budget.
Exactly. Whereas someone who's wealthier, they might not even notice the difference.
That makes sense. So these tariffs, they might sound good in theory as a way to replace income tax.
But they could actually end up making inequality even worse.
Right. It's like robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, the source material really emphasizes that point. It's a reminder that we need to think about those unintended consequences.
For sure. Not just the numbers, but the real impact on people's lives.
Right. It's about people.
It's funny because this whole thing with Trump looking at the Gilded Age for inspiration.
Yeah.
You talked about the good stuff, the economic growth.
Right.
But that era also led to some serious social problems.
Monopolies, labor exploitation. It was a rough time for a lot of folks.
Yeah, and the video makes a good point that we can learn from history.
Absolutely.
But we can't just romanticize the past either.
We have to learn from the mistakes, too.
And I don't know about you, but it feels like we're seeing some echoes of the Gilded Age even today.
Oh, how so?
Well, you've got rapid technological advancements and these booming economies.
Yeah.
But also rising inequality and this uncertainty about the future of work. It's a little unsettling.
Huh. Yeah, you're right. It's like history repeating itself in a way.
It really does make you think.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? What's the takeaway for all of us who are trying to understand what's going on?
I think the most important thing is to stay informed and engaged.
Okay.
Keep learning, and don't be afraid to challenge your own assumptions.
So essentially, like, be an active participant in shaping the future.
Exactly, because the decisions we make today will have a huge impact on what that future looks like.
That's a powerful thought. So we've talked about the historical context, the details of Trump's plan, the potential downsides of tariffs.
And how that approach could actually worsen inequality.
Right. So what else does the video highlight?
Well, it touches on something I find really interesting, the potential global impact.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We were going to get to that.
So the video suggests that if the U.S. slashes its corporate tax rate,
other countries might feel pressured to do the same.
To stay competitive, exactly.
Right. So like a chain reaction.
Yeah.
One country lowers taxes, then another one feels like they have to follow suit.
And so on and so forth, yeah.
But wouldn't that be good for the global economy, though? Lower taxes leading to more investment and growth?
Well, in theory, yeah, it sounds great.
Right.
But the reality is more complicated than that.
How so?
If governments end up with a lot less revenue, they might not be able to fund essential services.
Things like education and healthcare and
infrastructure, yeah, all the stuff that keeps a society functioning.
So it's all about finding the right balance.
Exactly. You need to find that sweet spot where you're promoting economic growth, but also making sure you can provide for your citizens.
Man, this is way more complex than I initially thought.
Tax policy is rarely simple.
And now we've got this global dimension to consider. It's not just about what happens in the U.S.
Right. Trump's plan could have ripple effects all over the world.
It really is a game changer. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
I think it's worth considering this question. How can different countries work together to create a global tax system that's both fair and sustainable?
That's a great question. It's not one I think has an easy answer, though.
No easy answers, but it's definitely something we need to be thinking about.
For sure. So we've covered a lot of ground, the historical context, the details of Trump's plan, the pros and cons, and now this global dimension.
We've really gone deep, haven't we?
We have.
Yeah.
But there's one more thing I want to touch on before we wrap things up.
Oh, what's that?
The video mentions this whole philosophical debate that's connected to this discussion about taxes.
Ah, yes. That's a fascinating aspect.
It's not just about the economics.
It's about our values and our vision for society.
Exactly.
Tell me more.
All right, well, let's shift gears and explore that in the final part of our deep dive.
Sounds good. I'm ready when you are. Okay, so let's talk philosophy. You mentioned this whole philosophical angle to Trump's tax plan.
Yeah, the source material kind of presents it as more than just policies.
Yeah.
You know?
Like a whole worldview or something.
Right. It reflects a certain philosophy about the role of government.
Okay. I'm listening. What's the main idea here?
Well, it's all about limited government and maximizing individual freedom, especially when it comes to the economy.
So less government intervention, more individual choice.
Got it. The argument is that by cutting or eliminating taxes, you give more power to individuals. They decide how to spend their money, not the government.
I can see the appeal there. But what about people who rely on government programs and services?
Right. What happens to them if the government has less money?
Yeah, seems like that could be a problem. Well, proponents of this limited government approach, they often say that a free market creates more wealth overall.
And that would eventually mean less need for government assistance.
Exactly. It's all about letting the market do its thing.
But critics might say that's a risky bet, especially for people who are already struggling.
Definitely a valid concern. It's a tough issue with no easy answers.
And this is where it gets really interesting, right?
The source material pushes us to think about the kind of society we want.
Okay.
Do we prioritize individual freedom above all else?
Even if it means more inequality.
Right. Or do we believe in a stronger role for government in providing a safety net and promoting social welfare?
Wow, those are some big questions.
They are. It's not just about economics. It's about our values.
Yeah, it feels like this tax plan is forcing us to confront some really fundamental beliefs about how society should work.
Exactly. And there's no right or wrong answer here. Different societies will strike different balances based on their own circumstances and values.
This deep dive has been a wild ride. We started with history, then economics, and now we're tackling philosophy. It's been amazing.
Yeah, it just shows how complex these issues really are.
So what's the main takeaway for our listeners?
Well, I think the most important thing is to stay engaged with these discussions. Don't be afraid to ask tough questions. Challenge your own assumptions.
Be an active participant in shaping the future.
Exactly, because tax policy, it's not just about numbers. It's about our vision for the kind of society we want to live in.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, folks, that's a wrap for this deep dive.
Thanks for joining us.
We covered a lot of ground, but as always, there's so much more to explore.
And I'll leave you with one final thought. What if moving away from income tax actually led to more creative and sustainable ways to fund government services?
That's a good one. What would that future look like?
And what trade-offs might we need to consider? It's worth thinking about.
It definitely is. Well, deep divers, until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
If you enjoyed this video and want to dive deeper into more cases like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like the video if you found the story compelling, and share it with your friends and family who might be interested in true crime and mysteries. By subscribing, you'll stay up to date with all our latest content and join a growing community of curious minds exploring the most fascinating cases. Click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything.